The man was on his way home when he received the news that his younger sister had been raped. He immediately rushed back home and just happened to run into the pervert. Kim Ji-hyuk quickly cornered him against a wall. Initially, he only wanted to arrest the man and bring him to justice, but because the man resisted so violently, he accidentally hit him, causing a traumatic brain injury. From being a renowned baseball player surrounded by praise, he became a criminal overnight. It was self-defense, but because the intruder was severely injured, Kim Ji-hyuk was found guilty of excessive self-defense and sentenced to a year in prison, pending the recovery of the attacker. Kim Ji-hyuk was inherently honest, wealthy but unfamiliar with bribery. He simply accepted whatever the court said. He bid farewell to his luxurious apartment and boarded the prisoner bus, heading to his new home, a place where sunlight never reached, making it cold and gloomy year-round. To top it off, the prison had a peculiar inspection procedure. Prisoners had to drop their pants and sit under a camera to be checked for contraband. Being a baseball superstar, he attracted a lot of attention from the guards. After completing all the checks, the golden boy of baseball officially became a penniless prisoner. He was placed in a cell with 6 other men. The bespectacled, intellectual Mr. Myung, who also served as the cell leader, was the first to greet him. The fat man in a yellow shirt was the gang leader, Cheol. The bald man next to him was his subordinate. The oldest man in the cell was a fan of Kim Ji-hyuk. Baebja, a repeat offender who had been in other detention centers, was admitted the same day as him. All of them had encountered Baebja in other temporary detention facilities. After introductions, it was time for the new members' welcome ceremony. They pinned Kim Ji-hyuk to the floor, blindfolded him, and used a sharpened toothbrush to draw a bit of his blood, all in the name of a cell initiation ritual. Kim Ji-hyuk screamed in fear. Luckily, the guys were only joking, just teasing him a little, not playing the classic newbie bullying game. That night, they all slept together. The first night in prison passed peacefully. The next morning, they gathered around the breakfast table. The food was simple, but still good. Kim Ji-hyuk was enjoying his meal until he heard the cell leader mention that the chef had 4 prior convictions for murder and dismemberment. Kim Ji-hyuk panicked immediately. As soon as the warden entered for his rounds, Kim Ji-hyuk requested to be transferred to the VIP cell. However, that wasn't possible because 2 new commissioners had joined the prison, filling up all the spots. During the break, the prisoners were allowed to go outside for fresh air. Kim Ji-hyuk was already disheartened and didn't feel like talking, but Baebja kept pestering him with chatter. The prison cook's newborn baby was named, and Baebja was brainstorming names. He suggested Ma Seo, which made Kim Ji-hyuk laugh hysterically, calling it a stupid name. Baebja, with a straight face, revealed that it was his own mother's name. Kim Ji-hyuk's laughter instantly disappeared, vowing to himself to think before speaking from now on. With plenty of free time, he sought out the cell leader to ask for an apple so he could practice throwing. A deal was struck, with a 50,000 won fee to be transferred to the leader's account. The warden then announced a visitor, Kim Ji-hyuk's mother and ex-girlfriend. He hadn't dared to tell his mother about the breakup because she loved Jae-ho dearly. When his mother left, Kim Ji-hyuk and Jae-ho finally had a heart-to-heart talk. Despite being separated, they still cared for each other. Jae-ho, with tears in her eyes, encouraged Kim Ji-hyuk to endure a little longer, assuring him he would be released. Just as Jae-ho finished speaking, upon returning to the cell, Kim Ji-hyuk found himself in conflict with Cheol, unable to tolerate the gang leader's disrespect towards the old man in the cell. They were about to engage in a fistfight, but the old man intervened, grabbing Kim Ji-hyuk's collar and demanding he shut up. Perhaps to protect him, the old man revealed that he couldn't afford personal items and Cheol had paid for many of them, forcing him to work off the debt. Baebja then confided in Kim Ji-hyuk about his situation. He was incarcerated this time for borrowing money from the bank to pay for his mother's surgery, but couldn't repay the loan with interest. However, his sister visited him that day, telling him his mother's surgery was unsuccessful. Baebja had done his best, so there was nothing he could do but sigh. Hearing this sad story, Kim Ji-hyuk felt deep empathy, but he still couldn't stand that gang leader. When everyone returned to the cell, Cheol, the gang leader, wanted to intimidate Kim Ji-hyuk, So he forced the old man to eat the entire box of cookies. Kim Ji-hyuk didn't say anything, but that didn't mean he was putting up with it. Waiting until midnight, when everyone was asleep, he got up and gave Cheol a beating he wouldn't forget. Fighting meant he would surely be sent to solitary confinement. But surprisingly, the warden brought him to his office and offered him tea and cookies with great politeness. Kim Ji-hyuk, trusting in his inherent good nature, thought he had met a decent man. But the warden simply said that if Kim Ji-hyuk called someone outside and transferred 30 million won into his account, he would get the best treatment. Kim Ji-hyuk detested those who abused their power, so that was never going to happen. The warden denied his bribe, angrily threw Kim Ji-hyuk into solitary. Cheol was delighted, while Byabja sat weeping because Kim Ji-hyuk's call was to ask someone to send money for his mother's ongoing medical expenses. In the dark solitary confinement cell, a kind-hearted guard brought Kim Ji-hyuk a pack of instant noodles. The two chatted amicably because they had been friends for a long time. The guard had just transferred to this prison 2 days ago, a move orchestrated because of his close friend, Kim Ji-hyuk. Flashing back to high school, the guard, Jun-ho, was Kim Ji-hyuk's baseball teammate. They had won countless championships for their school. They lived with their coach because their homes were far away. Jun-ho was much more skilled and intelligent than Kim Ji-hyuk. Both were rare talents, attracting offers from professional teams in Seoul. Their coach took them to the city, but on the way, they had an accident. The coach died, and the two students were badly injured. Although they survived, it took at least 2 years to recover. Jun-ho, discouraged, gave up his baseball dreams, while Kim Ji-hyuk diligently trained, continuing the coach's dream. Time rewarded those who worked hard. Kim Ji-hyuk became a famous baseball player, and Jun-ho became a police officer. Their reunion was ironic, one a guard, the other a prisoner. Seeing Kim Ji-hyuk's naivete, Jun-ho advised him not to be so trusting, not to help people he didn't know well. The old man he helped had 9 prior convictions and was in prison for murder. Kim Ji-hyuk was stunned, realizing he had helped a criminal. Snow fell on the prison. Kim Ji-hyuk gazed wistfully at the snowflakes. Byabja tried to strike up a conversation, but Kim Ji-hyuk ignored him, saying he liked ice cream and needed peace and quiet to enjoy it. However, Cheol was in the cell, loud and boisterous, making it impossible to relax. He yelled at the runner for not bringing him enough chicken legs. The terrified runner stammered that the upper cell had taken them, and as a simple food delivery guy, he couldn't do anything. The next day, the runner continued to deliver the prisoner's orders. When it was Kim Ji-hyuk's turn, he added a note of encouragement with a heart for the young man, who was very happy about it. As he turned to continue his work, Cheol called him back. He threatened Soji with force, demanding a knife, saying that his life would be miserable otherwise. Soji had no choice but to agree and reluctantly left. Just as Soji left, the guard knocked on the door, inviting Kim Ji-hyuk to the warden's office. Apparently, there were many baseball fans in prison, and they wanted Kim Ji-hyuk's autograph. He had the time and the sentiment, so he agreed. He asked the guard to get him a cup of coffee and signed 100 sheets for the fans. It was time for the prisoners to go outside for fresh air. Soji approached Kim Ji-hyuk, handing him a baseball that he had secretly taken. Then, he was harassed by Cheol again because he still hadn't obtained the knife. Terrified, Soji decided to take a risk. While everyone was singing hymns during the god-honoring ceremony, Soji snuck into the guard's office, stole a utility knife, and brought it to the church to give to Cheol. Byabja witnessed the exchange, realizing that trouble was brewing. That evening, Cheol had his gang wait in the cell for Kim Ji-hyuk to return, ready to teach him a lesson for punching him earlier. But they waited in vain, for Kim Ji-hyuk was still busy signing autographs in the office. He had actually finished 100 sheets a long time ago, but he said he really enjoyed signing and wanted to finish the whole stack of blank paper. The truth was, he was intentionally delaying to stay in the office and avoid returning to the cell. Finally, late at night, the guard had to urge him to leave. He had only been back in the cell for a few seconds when the alarm sounded. The armed guards went room to check, and all the prisoners lined up in the hallway with their hands on their heads because today was the scheduled cell inspection for forbidden items. As expected, they found the utility knife in Cheol's personal belongings, and he was sent to solitary confinement for 30 days. In truth, Kim Ji-hyuk was putting on an act of innocence, but he wasn't dumb. While signing autographs, he had seen the date on the calendar, the 13th, the day of the cell inspection. He had intentionally told Soji about it so that he could get back at Cheol. Jun-ho realized that Kim Ji-hyuk was intentionally helping Soji, so he called him out to talk late at night. Jun-ho advised his friend not to be too kind to anyone, because Soji, despite appearing innocent, was not a good person. He was in charge of food delivery, so he kept the tastiest things from the kitchen for himself. Kim Ji-hyuk replied that he wasn't helping Soji get revenge, but that while signing in the administrative office, he had accidentally read Cheol's crime, rape. This reminded him of his own sister, making him loathe the man and want to teach him a lesson. As they returned to the cell, they suddenly heard a heart-wrenching scream. One of Cheol's gang members was having a heart attack, but the warden nonchalantly counted from 1 to 10 to see if he was faking. Only when the prisoner stiffened did he panic and call for emergency services. While waiting, the warden personally performed CPR, reviving him, and then carried him to the ambulance. This left a good impression on Jun-ho. Despite disliking greedy types like the warden, he actually offered him a cup of expensive coffee. However, the warden did it not because he cared about the prisoner's life, but because he was afraid he would lose his job if a prisoner died on his shift. Hearing this, Jun-ho suddenly felt his expensive coffee was wasted. Soon, the second trial for Kim Ji-hyuk's case was about to take place. Byubja gave him plenty of advice to help him with the appeal. The warden, annoyed by Byubja's close relationship with the man he hated, ordered him to pack his belongings and move to a different cell. Before leaving, Byubja tearfully thanked Kim Ji-hyuk for helping his mother with her surgery, wishing him good luck with the appeal. He also left a small gift on his windowsill for him the night before the trial. The nasty warden wrote negative things about Kim Ji-hyuk to send to the court to sabotage him. The next day, Kim Ji-hyuk and the cell leader rode in the same car to court for the appeal. During the trial, a member of the jury passed a note to Kim Ji-hyuk's lawyer, brain dead. The intruder Kim Ji-hyuk had attacked had become a vegetable, so the court declared that the baseball player's actions were no longer self-defense, but excessive self-defense. Therefore, the 1-year sentence was upheld, even though he appealed. His family was devastated, unable to hold back their tears. In contrast to Kim Ji-hyuk, the cell leader successfully appealed his case, even though he had defrauded people of 7 billion won. Perhaps because he was the son of a powerful official, he enjoyed the law of the jungle. In the political world, when power and money speak, justice must remain silent. Kim Ji-hyuk was returned to prison. He ran for hours in the rain, filled with frustration. Obviously, the pervert was the bad guy. He had clearly caught him, but he was the one in prison. The South Korean legal system was truly infuriating to others. Back in his cell, Kim Ji-hyuk remembered the gift. He pulled the string by the window, and an ice cream cone appeared before him. Byubja had used all his possessions to buy the kind of ice cream Kim Ji-hyuk liked, because he had casually mentioned it while watching the snowfall. Byubja had promised, "If we ever meet again outside society, I'll treat you to an even better ice cream." Kim Ji-hyuk happily enjoyed his ice cream, while the warden was gloating, knowing that Kim Ji-hyuk was sentenced to another year. But the next news slapped the greedy old man in the face. His bribe taking from prisoners was exposed in the news. He couldn't understand, how could he have been caught on camera in that corner, out of sight? It turned out that Jun-ho had witnessed the warden's actions a few days earlier. Knowing Kim Ji-hyuk's baseball skills, he asked him to throw a ball to change the camera's angle, allowing him to secretly record the corrupt warden's actions. And so, the warden was arrested. The next day, Jae-ho visited Kim Ji-hyuk again. She couldn't hold back her tears as she saw her ex-boyfriend still in prison. After leaving, she also comforted his weak and helpless mother and sister. So, no matter where you live, if you have air to breathe, water to drink, a place to sleep, a bathroom, and food, then you should simply live and be happy. The quiet Kim Ji-hyuk understood this. For the first time, he participated in the group's singing loudly, shouting out his sorrow, so that he could be happy and carefree in the days ahead. But this was only the beginning of his prison life. Cheol's gang member, newly released from the hospital, saw Kim Ji-hyuk and stabbed him in the shoulder with a sharpened toothbrush. The wound seemed harmless, but it would have serious consequences later. He was seeking revenge for his leader, because Soji had told the other prisoners that Kim Ji-hyuk was the one who told him the time of the cell inspection so that he could give Cheol the knife. Therefore, Cheol's gang member sought revenge against Kim Ji-hyuk. For now, the wound wasn't causing Kim Ji-hyuk any pain. After resting, he returned to his normal state, and his prisoner life officially began. For safety reasons, he was transferred to a different cell. But his new cellmates were mysterious. During their break, they discussed something without including Kim Ji-hyuk. When they returned to the cell, the runner, working as an inside man for someone inside, was in on it. Mr. Kang handed a twisted piece of wire to Cuckoo, showing him how to pick a lock. Cuckoo took it and ran away, but returned a moment later because it didn't work. Luckily, the guard inside was asleep, so he didn't know anything. The cell leader took the hammer he had hidden in a book and gave it to Cuckoo to handle the situation before the guard woke up. Cuckoo ran off and started hitting something repeatedly. A moment later, smoke filled the cell. The plan had finally succeeded. The instant noodles were cooked, smelling delicious. Kim Ji-hyuk, excluded, sulked under his blanket. But when he was invited, he picked up his chopsticks and joined them. It turned out they had used the hammer to increase the heat of the thermostat, boiling water to cook the noodles. The next day was Labor Day for the prisoners, and everyone had to work in the woodworking shop. Besides being a baseball prodigy, Kim Ji-hyuk was also skilled at making chairs backwards. Not everyone could do it like him. The team leader was bored and didn't bother to reprimand him, simply telling him to take a break and cool his head. The truck carrying wood arrived, and everyone rushed out to work. Kim Ji-hyuk wanted to help, but he was stopped by Dr. Go from his cell because he was injured. The team leader agreed and assigned him lighter work, causing jealousy among the other prisoners. In the evening, Kim Ji-hyuk and Dr. Go had to stay late with a few dozen others. They told them that they would usually work overtime without pay, because the money went into the team leader's pocket. After a tiring day of work, Kim Ji-hyuk and Dr. Go returned to their cell to rest, only to discover they had a new cellmate. The new guy seemed to be a heavy addict, always in a dazed state, talking incoherently. The whole cell ganged up on him. Kim Ji-hyuk ignored it all, lying down and looking at a photo of him and Jae-ho. At the same time, she was confiding in her sister. "I think I'm the only one who loves Kim Ji-hyuk, but he's indifferent and uncaring." Her sister immediately retorted, "No guy would leave an important game in Seoul and fly back to Busan just to bring cold medicine to someone he doesn't love." Maybe because they didn't understand each other and didn't talk enough, they broke up. Back in the prison cell at midnight, Kim Ji-hyuk was sleeping when he woke up with a start because of a rustling sound. It was Dr. Go writing a complaint about working overtime without pay. Earlier, he had written a complaint asking to be allowed to take hot showers. The next morning, he handed the warden a complaint about taking daily hot showers because it was a matter of civil liberties. Thanks to Dr. Go, they were all able to enjoy hot showers to their heart's content. Not only that, Dr. Go also wrote a letter asking for Kim Ji-hyuk to be exempted from heavy labor in the woodworking shop because his wound wasn't healed. But Kim Ji-hyuk hid the letter because he didn't want special treatment. Dr. Go's petition led to the reprimanding of the overseers in the woodworking shop, and prisoners now received their fair wages. This made those who had benefited from the system unhappy. The next day, after work, someone stole a wrench. The guard discovered the missing tool and gathered the prisoners together to check their bags. Surprisingly, the wrench was found in Kim Ji-hyuk's bag. It turned out that someone suspected him of reporting the team leader and framed him. Kim Ji-hyuk was detained. A few prisoners who resented him started making trouble. One cut the power, another took the wrench, wanting to attack Kim Ji-hyuk, but the team leader came in and stopped him. However, he wasn't a good guy either, harboring a grudge against Kim Ji-hyuk. He stomped on a broom, breaking it. He had been looking at him one moment, and the next, he was beating up the prisoners. Wasn't he trying to scare the chickens to warn the monkeys, warning Kim Ji-hyuk not to interfere in his affairs? But it didn't stop there. The old man was also gay. He ordered his gang to restrain Kim Ji-hyuk and then made a lewd advance on him. Luckily, Jun-ho arrived in time, turned on the lights, dispersed the perverted prisoners, and saved his friend. While his cellmate was almost robbed of his manhood, the others were trying to change the TV channel to a program they liked. Cell leader Min was obsessed with the Heroic Nature movie, which was starting in 10 minutes, so anyone who could figure out how to change the channel would be rewarded with a cookie. Mr. Kang and Jean volunteered for the task. While Jean went to ask to see the prison director, Mr. Kang fiddled with a copper wire and fashioned an antenna out of a piece of steel wire. Cell leader Min was unimpressed. "Why do you need an antenna for cable?" Mr. Kang's mind went into overdrive. Now, to remove the channel control button under the TV, they needed fire to melt the plastic. He made a simple fire from a battery and some toilet paper. After holding it under the TV for a while, the plastic melted and the button was also scorched. Meanwhile, Jean returned to the cell. Mr. Kang refused to back down. Desperate, he hit the TV, and the channel actually changed, but it was because of the remote control in Jean's hand. "The hamburger is yours, Grandpa." It turned out that Jean had burst into tears in front of the prison director, saying that he resembled his deceased father. While the director was still touched, the remote control on his desk disappeared. They watched the movie together, sharing their stories of how they ended up in prison. Mr. Kang was once the best engineer in the steel plant, but he was sentenced to 3.5 years for gambling. Dr. Go was a finance manager who was arrested for embezzling 10 billion won. However, his favorite hobby was filing complaints. The heir to the biggest Korean hot pot restaurant was in prison for drug use. Despite being a wealthy kid, his mother didn't bail him out. She wanted him to learn a lesson, so she threatened to fire his lawyer and forbid him from defending his son. Jean was unemployed for so long that he stole a delivery truck. And finally, cell leader Kim was in prison for murder, but his good behavior reduced his sentence to 25 years. He only had 3 years left. The cellmates grew closer as they shared their stories, so the next morning they sat down to eat chicken together, strengthening their bond. After finishing, Kim Ji-hyuk went outside to talk to his friend Jun-ho. Curious, Jun-ho asked his superstar friend who he had dated before. Kim Ji-hyuk blushed and said they had broken up, but he didn't want to reveal details. Jun-ho, frustrated, threw a baseball to his friend. He thought it would be an easy catch for Kim Ji-hyuk at such a close distance, but his hand was completely useless. Jun-ho put the ball in Kim Ji-hyuk's hand again, but he still couldn't grasp it. This was like ruining the career of a professional catcher. No one knew about Kim Ji-hyuk's loss of hand function. Reporters kept calling the new warden, requesting interviews. He initially refused, but when he saw other guards appearing on live television, his competitive nature kicked in. He agreed to the interview without consulting Kim Ji-hyuk. Kim Ji-hyuk submitted a request to the warden to go outside for a hand exam, but he discovered that they were using his medical needs, which prisoners should have been entitled to, as a bargaining chip. He had to agree to the interview in exchange for the exam. Kim Ji-hyuk was still reeling from the shock of his hand and wasn't ready to face the media. The guard gave him time to think. It was truly awful. Kim Ji-hyuk's hand couldn't even hold a bar of soap now. He returned to his cell, his wealth a burden. The antics of his friends weren't enough to cheer him up. Outside, Jun-ho was talking to the prison doctor, trying to find a way to get Kim Ji-hyuk treated, but the doctor was a heartless jerk. Moreover, the prison didn't have enough equipment. Jun-ho returned home dejectedly and sat down to talk to his brother. To his surprise, his brother knew about Kim Ji-hyuk's girlfriend and showed him her photo online. She looked familiar, as if he had seen her somewhere before. It turned out that she was the daughter of his old coach. The next day, Jae-ho brought Kim Ji-hyuk's mother to visit him. They ran into Jun-ho by chance. 3 years had passed, but they still talked naturally. Kim Ji-hyuk's younger sister also came to visit, but she didn't dare go in. Ever since the incident, she blamed herself for her brother's imprisonment. A singing competition was about to take place in prison. The winner would get a day off. Dr. Go wasn't really interested in it, but his wife had visited him the day before, informing him that his daughter was scheduled for surgery next week. He needed to see his daughter, so he signed up for a family visit. He practiced singing diligently. The singing competition and the interview were approaching, but Kim Ji-hyuk still hadn't responded to the warden, making him very anxious. He forced Kim Ji-hyuk to work hard in the woodworking shop, despite his injury. The teen leader took advantage of the situation and piled on more work for everyone. If they didn't finish, they wouldn't get food, and anyone who slowed down would have to deal with the consequences. This was a veiled threat, directed at Kim Ji-hyuk. Dr. Go knew about Kim Ji-hyuk's condition and volunteered to help him with some chores. After the other prisoners had gone to eat, the teen leader used Kim Ji-hyuk's slow pace as an excuse to keep him behind, threatening him with a stick. Surprisingly, Kim Ji-hyuk didn't even flinch. The team leader's strong blow caused his head to bleed. He wanted to use this opportunity to get treated outside the prison. When he went for a checkup, he was shocked to learn that his hand injury was serious and he had lost his ability to play baseball. His friend visited and bought him his favorite food, making him choke up with emotion. He was touched by his friend's kindness, but also overwhelmed by the shock of his current situation. Jun-ho encouraged him, telling him to keep practicing, and he would definitely recover. He had done it before, so he could do it again, because he was the kind of person who never gave up. That night, Jun-ho stayed at the hospital with his friend. He was very curious about Kim Ji-hyuk's love life and couldn't help but ask who had pursued whom back then, Jae-ho or Kim Ji-hyuk. Kim Ji-hyuk smiled and said that Jae-ho had confessed first. The night rain brought back Kim Ji-hyuk's memories of the past. He had seen Jae-ho like a sister. In the middle of the night, she was heartbroken, and he didn't hesitate to take her out for spicy ribs. He was a bit naive, but he always cared for people through his actions. In the middle of the night, he could only write down his longing for her on paper. The scene shifted to the singing competition. Since the prize was a day of freedom, all the prisoners performed with gusto. Dr. Go, with his talent for singing and his desire to see his daughter, won the competition. But surprisingly, no freedom awaited him. The overseers used the chance of a B-level sentence reduction to force Dr. Go to accept the interview. They couldn't force Kim Ji-hyuk, but they also couldn't refuse the reporters. But to everyone's surprise, the one who walked into the interview room was Kim Ji-hyuk. He didn't want to burden others with his problems. Standing in front of the camera, Kim Ji-hyuk announced that he would retire. No one saw this coming. Even Jun-ho was speechless, returning to the cell. Dr. Go's prize was a delicious box of bread, but he wasn't allowed to see his daughter. Kim Ji-hyuk lost hope and enthusiasm for his passion, so no one was happy. Mr. Kang took out a bottle of liquor he had been hiding and shared it with his friends to drown their sorrows. They were sitting there drinking and eating cookies when a guard saw them. Kim Ji-hyuk wasn't worried because he knew this guard was different from the others. He was the one who dared to oppose his superiors for sending Kim Ji-hyuk, who was injured, to work in the woodworking shop. But he couldn't protect him because he was powerless. The guard called Kim Ji-hyuk outside. He wanted to arrange for him to escape for a medical exam that night. But he feared his own actions would implicate the guard, so Kim Ji-hyuk refused. On the other hand, Jun-ho returned to his room and found a piece of paper in his pocket. It contained Kim Ji-hyuk's wishes. His only desires were to sleep without setting an alarm, to eat a lot of spicy ribs, to drink coffee, and to tell his sister that it wasn't her fault he was in prison. Kim Ji-hyuk's dreams were simple, but they were all things he couldn't achieve. So, Jun-ho would fulfill those wishes for him. The wishes lay dormant on the bed. On the weekends, he would turn off the alarm clock and all annoying calls. Then, he would go to the delicious spicy ribs restaurant, order 2 cups of coffee, 1 hot and 1 cold, and drink his fill. In the evening, he would dress up, get flowers, and visit Kim Ji-hyuk's sister. He would tell her that her brother sent his regards, that what happened wasn't her fault. If it happened again, he would still make the same choice. So don't cry or blame yourself anymore, his sister. He loves her very much. Hearing those unspoken words from her silly brother, she was incredibly moved. The one with the burden was Dr. Go. In truth, he hadn't defrauded anyone or evaded taxes. He was in prison for taking the blame for his superiors. Every time she visited him, his wife wondered why the company sent her his salary every month. It was even more than before. but she didn't know that he went to prison to make more money for his wife and children. Everyone has unspoken hardships, even those that they can't share with their loved ones. Cell leader Min was no exception. When he was a gangster, he had a younger brother named Lee Jong-yoon. He treated the kid like family, so he advised him not to go deeper into the path of murder, but to turn his life around for the better, as Lee Jong-yoon did, full of youthful vigor. But the young man only wanted to live recklessly once. During a bar fight, Mr. Kim was ambushed. He wasn't prepared, so his opponent choked him. In a critical moment, Lee Jong-yoon stepped in to protect his elder brother. But his strength was too much, and he killed the man. Their gang was busted by the police and disbanded. Lee Jong-yoon was sentenced to death, while Mr. Kim was sentenced to life imprisonment. He didn't know, but he still wrote a lot of letters to his younger brother. The day he received a reply was the day his brother was executed. Mr. Min was heartbroken when he heard the news and cried. Guilt gnawed at him. Jin resembled Lee Jong-yoon back then, so Mr. Kim cherished them both and treated them like father and son. Jin's habit was shoplifting. It became an obsession, ingrained in his blood. He was due to be released in a week, so he was allowed outside to work in woodworking, to breathe the air of freedom. His appearance caused someone's wallet to disappear, so they suspected him and forced him to strip naked. Jin was outraged. Just because he was a prisoner labeled a thief, he was treated like this. Luckily, the supervisor spoke up for him. They talked in a corner for a while and then excused themselves to leave. He went to a far-off place and threw something in the trash. Perhaps the supervisor knew that Jin had stolen the wallet, but he didn't want to extend Jin's prison sentence for this. He believed that young people make mistakes and have time to correct them. But could bad habits be corrected? Back in prison, there were many stories from that day. At the woodworking shop, there was a carpentry skills competition. The winner would receive 5 million won. Someone with Dr. Go's skills couldn't miss it. The competition began. He even brought Kim Ji-hyuk along as his assistant. But our naive friend was so engrossed in the woodworking skills of the person next to him that he forgot all about his teammate. At the end of the competition, the skilled carpenter won first place and received 5 million won. Dr. Go, working on his own, also won 5th place, receiving 30,000 won. The prize money would be transferred to each person's account. Knowing that there was going to be a cell inspection that night, everyone immediately destroyed any forbidden items in their rooms before the police arrived. The inspection went smoothly, but Warden Na discovered that Jin's watch had been modified with some details, indicating that there was a small sharp object in the room that could move the watch hands. Guard Peen tried to speak up, but the warden wasn't listening. Even Mr. Min, a respected figure, pleaded for Jin, to no avail. But Jin wasn't wise. He was getting out of prison next week, so he was ready to betray his adoptive father, claiming that the watch was his, and he had only borrowed it for a day. So, Mr. Min was locked in solitary confinement, incredibly disappointed to be stabbed in the back by someone he loved. The traitor was now isolated and hated by everyone in the cell. He was truly vile. His cowardly nature would never change. But when he was returned to the cell, Mr. Min was still gentle with the traitor. He understood that he was young, had a long life ahead of him, and shouldn't be imprisoned in this place any longer. He just hoped that Jin would live a good life, making him moved and embarrassed, so he burst into tears. When he was released, Mr. Min stood there watching for a long time, like a father seeing his son off. Returning to the woodworking shop, Dr. Go enthusiastically offered everyone cookies with the money he had won in the competition. Meanwhile, Gomi was dejected because he hadn't received any money in his account. Knowing the team leader's greed, he assumed they had taken his money and angrily destroyed everything. The two old wolves in sheep's clothing, the team leader and guard Lee, adamantly denied it. They had the warden suggest they print out a bank statement, and then everything would be clear. There was no other option, so the team leader had to obey. Sure enough, his account had 5 million won. But the ironic part was that he didn't know about it. During the competition, while reporting his account details for the prize money transfer, Guard Lee had entered the team leader's personal account number. He wanted to sabotage his partner in crime, because after Dr. Go's accusation, both he and the team leader had received less and less benefits. Furthermore, the prisoners listened to the team leader more than Guard Lee, so he had to find someone else to obey him. He framed the team leader to get him fired. Truly, the scariest thing of all is the human heart. Returning to Kim Ji-hyuk, it was his birthday today. The entire cell had prepared a special chocolate cake. Outside, the guard thanked him for agreeing to the interview and gave him a baseball training field as a gift. But Kim Ji-hyuk couldn't be happy with this gift, something he had wished for hundreds of times before but never received. He heavily told Jun-ho that he had cancer. Jun-ho didn't even know about it. It turned out that Kim Ji-hyuk had gone through 12 rounds of chemotherapy. He was tired every day, and whenever he was awake, he wanted to just die. In his youth, he had spent years undergoing chemotherapy while trying his hardest to train. Every day was like torture for him. So, Kim Ji-hyuk shouted out, expressing all the suppressed bitterness he had held inside for so long. He hated baseball, but life had made him a superstar. People praised him and forced him to train relentlessly, ignoring his illness. Then, he left the cell. A new member had joined, Lieutenant Yu Dewey. His crime was assault. He had kicked someone in the chest, causing his death. The newcomer immediately put on a cold, superior facade. The first person he spoke to was Kim Ji-hyuk, but he poked fun at his baseball woes. This sensitive topic made the entire cell fall silent, but Kim Ji-hyuk was quiet and reserved, so there was no fight. Later, he joined everyone else in participating in the Buddhist festival, playing shuttlecock with enthusiasm, reaching almost 100 kicks. But he missed the shuttlecock, and everything went back to zero. Looking at Mr. Kang, he was too bored to even speak, because he was addicted to drugs. His wife loved him, so she wanted to hide cigarettes in the prize noodle box during the festival. If Kim Ji-hyuk had successfully kicked the shuttlecock, the entire cell would have received this prize. Mr. Kang also wanted to smoke, but his hand was faster than his brain. He caught the shuttlecock, and the noodles and cigarettes vanished. While he was sulking, Dr. Go mentioned that the next competition was volleyball. Passing the volleyball with your feet sounded ridiculous. But hey, anything that didn't require using his hands, Kim Ji-hyuk might be able to handle. So, Mr. Kang once again pinned his hopes on him. 3 strikes, and you're out. Prison life wasn't as scary as you thought. Han Yong would constantly ask for cold medicine and gulp it down in one go, just to feel dizzy and high. He was a drug addict and had become a delusional character, causing his cellmates to fear him. They dared only watch from a distance. And Kim Ji-hyuk, he asked the infirmary for a rubber band to strengthen his grip. He didn't know how to tie it, and as soon as he pulled it, the rubber band snapped, knocking him unconscious. One crazy guy and one naive guy sharing a cell. It was actually kind of funny. The newcomer, who everyone thought had a mental problem, was called for a session with a psychologist. He tried to tell them that he wasn't a wolf, but of course no one believed him. Speaking of his best friend Jun-ho, while Kim Ji-hyuk was stuck in the prison, he visited his mother and sister on his behalf. Jun-ho's warmth and bright smile brought a rare smile to Kim Ji-hyuk's sister's face. In fact, she had liked Jun-ho since they were in school. On the day her brother won the competition, Mina brought a large bouquet of flowers to school, but only gave her brother a small flower. She saved the big bouquet for Jun-ho. Their picture together was her most precious possession at the time. But when she discovered that Jun-ho had left her gift on a chair, Mina buried her youthful feelings. Back in prison, the atmosphere was boiling again because of the upcoming foot volleyball competition. Mr. Kang was beaming. The grocery store owner came to ask about the cigarette supply. It turned out that Mr. Kang was not only addicted to cigarettes, but he was also a cigarette dealer. He didn't have any stock in his locker, but he was relaxed. He was certain Kim Ji-hyuk's strong physique would secure a win. But as the saying goes, don't hope for too much, because you'll be disappointed. No matter how strong Kim Ji-hyuk was, his life's destiny was still baseball. So, out of habit, when the volleyball came, he caught it with his hand instead of his foot. The second time, the third time, he did the same thing. Mr. Kang's face was filled with utter disappointment, but he thought that tomorrow was the festival, so there was still a chance. But the competition was a gold common game, requiring a bit of intelligence, and Kim Ji-hyuk was naive, and Mr. Kang was foolish, so they were out of luck. The only person in the cell who signed up was Dr. Go, so everyone put their hopes on him. Mr. Kang begged him, saying if he won, he would be gifted a box of noodles. But Dr. Go, in his honesty, wanted to share the noodles equally with everyone, leaving Mr. Kang helpless. The next day, the competition began. Kim Ji-hyuk, Mr. Kang, and Mr. Min didn't understand the game, but they cheered on Dr. Go enthusiastically. He did not disappoint, reaching the finals. But in the final round, luck often turns sour. Dr. Go tried his best, but still answered incorrectly. But the surprise was yet to come. The winner of the Gold Common game was none other than Han Yang. It turned out that Mr. Kang had accidentally discovered that Han Yang was actually a top graduate of a prestigious university with a high IQ. But he had become a fool because of his drug addiction. So, Mr. Kang secretly bought him a lot of drugs in exchange for a deal. If he stayed sober and won the game, he would get even more drugs like this. Mr. Kang got his noodles, and Han Yang got his drugs. He continued to see his Monkey King. Now, it was clear that no one in this cell was normal. The atmosphere was happy, but Lieutenant Yu Dewey returned. An invisible pressure fell over the cell, silencing everyone. But Han Yang found him very attractive. Suddenly, Jun-ho secretly called all of Kim Ji-hyuk's cellmates outside. He had a plan to rekindle Kim Ji-hyuk's passion for baseball, to help him live positively again. As friends, they all agreed. The plan was carried out immediately. But instead of giving advice, these gods went crazy and used dry ice to create a dreamlike illusion. Then, they took turns impersonating the late coach, urging Kim Ji-hyuk to pursue his passion. Unexpectedly, this triggered the protagonist's spirit. Early the next morning, Jun-ho saw Kim Ji-hyuk actively using the baseball field for practice. Kim Ji-hyuk threw the ball, releasing his frustration. Jun-ho gently hugged his friend from behind and patted him. Late into the night, they talked. Kim Ji-hyuk was afraid that if he returned, others would have expectations of him. He was afraid he wouldn't be able to do it. But Jun-ho immediately countered. People don't have time to think about something like that. While they were living their own lives, time passed, and they wouldn't pay attention to anything. Jun-ho wanted his friend to stand on the baseball field one last time before retiring. Not only Jun-ho was encouraging him, when he returned to the cell, Kim Ji-hyuk received a training rope and weights from the cell leader. He had sold his beloved radio to buy them. The attention from others warmed his heart and gave him more confidence. Since he no longer had a radio, Han Yang became the cell's lullaby singer. Lieutenant Yu Dewey was taken for religious counseling. But unexpectedly, while waiting, he took a chair, smashed a window, and jumped out. Guard Ping panicked and sent someone to bring him back to solitary confinement. But when they checked the cameras, they realized that he had broken the window to rescue the person in charge, who was having a heart attack. Feeling guilty for wrongly accusing the good guy, Guard Ping offered Yu Dewey a sausage and apologized. Lieutenant Yu Dewey didn't hold a grudge and happily accepted the sausage. Was someone like that truly as cruel as rumors claimed? When he was in the barracks, he was so sociable and cared about that young soldier. But in a shift in the scene, both Kim Ji-hyuk and Han Yang had loved ones visiting them. The one who sat in front of Han Yang was the one who had accused him, sending him to prison. But perhaps it was because she wanted her lover to turn his life around. And the girl in Kim Ji-hyuk's eyes was the one he loved most. But unexpectedly, he said that this was the last time he would agree to see her. This broke Jai-ho's heart. When she got home, she threw their picture in the trash and sobbed. The truth was that when he broke up with Jai-ho, Kim Ji-hyuk didn't feel good either, but he had his own burdens. He didn't want to be an obstacle to her finding happiness. It wasn't just Kim Ji-hyuk who was tired of life, but also Lieutenant Yu Dewey. Everyone was afraid of the guards, but he glared directly at them. The guard who was glared at was baffled and went home to read Yu Dewey's file. He had only read a few lines when he was shocked by the lieutenant's impressive profile. He graduated from the Army Officer Academy, was studying abroad in America as a second lieutenant, handsome, intelligent, and had a good character. He also had social standing and was respected. The warden overheard someone nearby recounting this. When the autopsy report revealed that the soldier died from shock, he became even more suspicious of Yu Dewey's case. There was definitely something fishy. Actually, during his interrogation, Lieutenant Yu tried to emphasize that he had hit the man, but not hard enough to kill him. Yet, the army hadn't investigated thoroughly and convicted him, throwing him in prison. That's why he was so tired of life, putting on a face that hated the whole world. Yet, fate had him live with these clueless cellmates who sang and danced all day. On top of that, during meals, he had to listen to their gossip. During roll call, he had to smell the not-so-pleasant odor from Han Yong's toilet. In prison, there was a special day called Roll Call Day. On this day, any cell that was well-behaved, called out their names loudly and clearly with all members present, would receive a very meaningful gift. It meant that when loved ones came to visit, they could hold hands and touch without being separated by a glass barrier. So, everyone was determined to keep Han Yong sober. The guard saw that Lieutenant Yu Dewey was incredibly handsome and, out of favoritism, revealed to everyone that Monday was roll call day before leaving. He winked at Lieutenant Yu Dewey. In the woodworking shop, Gomi had been promoted to foreman. Guard Lee wanted to bring him on board, to continue to steal prisoners' wages with him. But Gomi had come from the prisoner ranks, so he wasn't easily swayed. He was forced to complete 100 products, when the maximum required was only 50. He was under pressure from his superiors, so he pressured his subordinate to use the electric saw to work faster, causing him to cut his hand. Being a leader isn't easy. Returning to our protagonist, he spent the day in the woodworking shop, but at night, he practiced throwing baseballs. His arm strength was still weak, so his throws weren't as precise as they used to be. However, with diligent training, he would definitely achieve success. The roll call day with a prize had arrived. Han Yong, true to everyone's expectations, finally managed to call out his name without stuttering. Kim Ji-hyuk, who sat next to him, was surprised. The guys also knew how to seize the opportunity. Complaints placed in the usual mailbox were often destroyed by the mean guards. So, on roll call day, there were reporters present. Kim Ji-hyuk was invited to give an interview. He subtly mentioned Dr. Go's complaint letter, and then went on to flatter the warden, calling him a man who knew the difference between personal and professional matters, so he would surely resolve everything. The warden was flattered, so he took out the letter to show off his ability to handle things. It was the letter requesting a vote for a new foreman in the woodworking shop. The warden saw nothing wrong with it, so he approved it right in front of the reporters. The matter was then handed over to Foreman Gomi, who raised his hand, wanting to continue as foreman. But he wasn't allowed. Dr. Go, with an itch for power, volunteered to be the candidate, but he had only finished high school, so he wasn't chosen either. Unable to let Gomi continue as head, Lieutenant Yu Dewey nominated Kim Ji-hyuk. So now, there were two candidates, Go Kim and Kim Ji-hyuk. Then, the prisoners in the shop would vote to choose the new foreman. Dr. Go enthusiastically created flyers encouraging his fellow prisoners to vote for Kim Ji-hyuk. He seemed naive, so he was quite beloved by the prisoners. A naive guy playing with a fool, dancing a dance to win votes for himself. It was funny, but when night came, he couldn't sleep because he missed Jai-ho. She was heartbroken too and stayed up all night studying at a coffee shop. It seemed that this guy was Jai-ho's college friend and had a secret crush on her, so he pursued her relentlessly, even though she wasn't interested at all. Meanwhile, Kim Ji-hyuk's sister got off work and was picked up by a guy. It was Junho's brother, following his orders to pick up the beautiful girl. Back in the woodworking shop, Kim Ji-hyuk had 9 votes, while Go-min had 12. So, the 4 deciding votes were in the hands of the addicts. Dr. Go approached them, handing them Kim Ji-hyuk's campaign flyer. But he had nothing to offer in exchange, so it was hard to make friends. Dr. Go didn't give up. He pleaded with them verbally, but it didn't work, so he switched to writing a letter. On the day the election results were announced, Kim Ji-hyuk smiled confidently. So, Junho was indeed promoted. It turned out that it was all thanks to his younger brother, Baebja, the one who had given Kim Ji-hyuk the ice cream. He became the drug dealer, specifically for cold medicine and ecstasy, so he could freely command the addicts, and in the process, became Mr. Kang's rival in the drug trade. After days of hard work, he finally saw results. Kim Ji-hyuk threw the baseball again, hitting the target dead center. It wasn't because his arm strength had recovered, but because he discovered he was ambidextrous. He could throw accurately with both his left and right hand. With more practice, he could return to being a professional pitcher. The day of the prison visit was also approaching. Han Yong sat next to his girlfriend, whispering like a young woman touching her boyfriend, but he was rejected coldly. Dr. Go met his wife. His salary for the month was tripled again, but his wife was probably disappointed because she had discovered the secret that he was in prison for the company. He had earned his doctorate, so he could easily use his intelligence to become wealthy, instead of enduring this shame. So, two of them returned to the cell, both feeling glum. Kim Ji-hyuk and Dr. Go had no visitors. Lieutenant Yu met his brother. His brother always believed in his innocence, but Yu Dewey was powerless. He had been framed, and in truth, there was a spoiled brat in the barracks who bullied the weak. The target of his bullying was the soldier who was close to Yu Dewey. That night, the soldier was beaten so badly that he died. Yet, after killing the man, he ordered his gang to dress the victim up properly, and he pretended to be trying to revive his teammate by performing CPR. Then, he blamed everything on Yu Dewey. He returned to his room and pressured his gang members to falsely accuse Yu Dewey. Under the pressure of someone powerful, no one dared to disobey. Because earlier, Yu Dewey had accidentally hit the soldier. Plus, the victim was the son of a high-ranking officer, so all the blame fell on Yu Dewey. The matter was quickly settled. Yu Dewey's brother didn't believe his brother was guilty because someone had shown him the soldier's duty roster. It showed that when he was punished by Lieutenant Zheng, he was fine and even went on duty. Later, he was beaten that night, causing him to vomit blood and die. He was already tired of life, but he was forced to go to counseling and met a crazy guy who was tired of living. He kept making sarcastic remarks, but the lieutenant was fearless. So, the two of them fought. The crazy guy dodged and hugged Yu Dewey, pulling him down to the table, punching him in the face. Guard Ping rushed in to stop them. Surprisingly, Sung retaliated with a punch, essentially making it a tie. Guard Na, without thinking, punished them both. No letters, no calls, no visits for 2 weeks. 2 points were deducted from each of their rehabilitation records. The chubby prisoner complained that the punishment violated his prisoner rights, but Guard Na didn't say anything. If he didn't accept the punishment, he would be transferred to a different cell. Hearing this, the chubby guy shut up because he was afraid of being transferred to a new cell and dealing with a new set of bullies. Lieutenant Yu Dewey was steadfast. He wouldn't admit fault even if he was transferred. Back in the protagonist's cell, Dr. Go had been experiencing severe stomach pain for days, fearing that he had appendicitis and wanting to go outside for treatment. But Guard Na didn't approve because the legal department was coming to inspect the prison next week. He was afraid that something unexpected might happen, so he temporarily halted all outside treatments. Mr. Zim softly pleaded with Guard Na to be merciful and allow Dr. Go to seek treatment outside. He thought about it and made a demand. If everyone in the cell sincerely wrote a petition requesting Dr. Go's treatment outside, he would agree. Everyone's eyes immediately focused on Lieutenant Yu Dewey. The deadline for submitting the petition was 9 p.m. tomorrow. Any requests after that would not be considered. The warden, Na, was sure that Lieutenant Yu Dewey wouldn't write, so she devised this plan to make the whole ward despise him. As expected, Lieutenant Yu Dewey refused to write the letter. He didn't want to get close to anyone or have any connection with them. Everyone in the ward began to feel helpless because of Lieutenant Yu Dewey's coldness, so they didn't want to bother him. If it had been Han Yong, Mr. Kang would have already pounced on him. Han Yong blamed Yu Dewey for being heartless. In the bathroom, Kim Ji-hyuk simply said, "I believe the lieutenant is innocent." He too was enduring an unspoken injustice. But what was the point? A day of unhappiness passes, a day of happiness passes, time will pass. You just live. Living with material abundance outside or living in prison is still living. These simple words moved Yu Dewey. He took the initiative to write a letter requesting the doctor be allowed to go out for a checkup. Taking this opportunity, Ping, the jailer, invited him for a cup of coffee so he could hear his story of injustice. Because everyone in the ward wrote letters requesting Dr. Go be allowed to go out for a checkup, he found out he had kidney stones. They were too small to be removed surgically, so the only way was to pass them through urination, and the only way to do that was to drink a lot of water. Although he was in a lot of pain, Dr. Go still asked Ping to get him the reply letter from the company. The day before, he had heard from his wife that the company had tripled her salary. Even Dr. Go was surprised, so he had to ask the CEO. Reading the reply, he realized that they were having problems with the contract again, so they wanted him to take the blame to help them out, promising to pay for his daughter's education abroad. The condition was very good, but the price to pay was too high, leaving Dr. Go helpless and bursting into tears. Going back to Lieutenant Udiwi, he surprisingly agreed to tell Ping about his story. In the barracks, the rich soldiers always abused their power to bully the second-class soldiers. Every time this happened, Lieutenant Udiwi would intervene to put things right, so the bully held a grudge against him. That bastard beat the second-class soldier to death and forced everyone to blame it on him. He was the son of a high-ranking congressman, so both the soldiers and the military prosecutor were afraid of him. That's how Lieutenant Udiwi was wrongly imprisoned. His brother didn't believe he was guilty, so he would stand in front of the military headquarters every day crying out for justice, but they ignored him. Day after day, it went on like this until he met the sorrowful soldier. He agreed to go out to eat with Udiwi's brother. He also admitted that he had given the second-class soldiers duty roster. Lieutenant Udiwi had been framed. Back in the prison, because he couldn't handle any objects, the pen holder was lost in the void. The office pen fell apart with the slightest touch, so Kim Ji-hyuk was fired. The position of factory manager was given to Dr. Go. In the ward, Lieutenant Udiwi seemed to be getting along better with everyone day by day. He always ignored everyone's concern, but now when Han Yang asked him what kind of coffee he wanted, he opened his mouth and asked for a cup of iced coffee. Kim Ji-hyuk continued to diligently train his physical strength and throw baseballs. His good friend Jun-ho was always by his side, but today he was called away due to an emergency. A prisoner had hanged himself. Actually, it was a trick by the guys in the ward to force someone to hang themselves so they could go out for a checkup and bring in some necessary items for them. Fortunately, the observant jailers discovered this trick. However, there was a chance that the weak inmates might actually die if they were forced to hang themselves. It made Jun-ho extremely worried. But when he was talking on the phone with Kim Ji-hyuk's sister, he immediately smiled. The reason he wholeheartedly treated his friend's family well was because of the time when Kim Ji-hyuk was a star. But when he met Kim Ji-hyuk again, Jun-ho still enthusiastically treated him as a good friend. He also treated his friend very well. Jun-ho felt that someone like Kim Ji-hyuk was worthy of being considered a confidant. Not only was he loyal, but Jun-ho was also very talented. From his younger brother's story, it turned out that Jun-ho was not only a warden but also a co-founder of a media company. Its market value was hundreds of billions. However, everything had gone wrong because he had pulled out early after giving up his baseball career. It only took him 1 year to pass the police university entrance exam. To be fair, there are no footprints of lazy people on the path to success. Jun-ho also had to work hard to study. When she learned about this, Mina was very impressed, and it seemed that the companionship of Jun-ho and his brother had made her smile again. Outside, his sister gradually escaped from her feelings of guilt. In prison, his brother got along with his cellmates. These gods love each other dearly, and they always share their food equally. Only Han Yang is always in a heavenly state, so he constantly gets kicked in the face by Kang. Lieutenant Udiwi seems to be gradually adapting to this lifestyle. He has broken down his cold wall and kept Kim Ji-hyuk doing push-ups. Zim secretly got up at midnight, found a book, and learned about Dr. Go's letter, realizing his cellmate had endured much injustice. The next night, he asked the warden to let him and Dr. Go go outside for a conversation. Kim blamed his friend for being too meek, allowing the directors to exploit him like a fool. Even if his wife and children received a lot of money and were able to study abroad, wouldn't they be unhappy without a husband and father? So, Kim urged Dr. Go to think carefully and stop bowing to authority. In truth, Dr. Go was already very regretful, but he felt powerless at the moment. Knowing about their friend's situation, the men in the cell couldn't just sit idly. They suggested that Dr. Go take advantage of the director's visit to continue accusing him, and then record the conversation. It was impossible to bring recording equipment into the visiting room, but they had their righteous brother, Warden Ping. Sure enough, not long after, the director visited his scapegoat, using the same tactic of using money to force Dr. Go to confess in his place. He persuaded him to stay in prison for a few more years, saying that the N money was no problem. This time, Dr. Go didn't tolerate it anymore. He dared to yell and curse the director. "Go to hell, you bastard." Even if his salary was tripled or quadrupled, and his daughter was given money to study abroad, he wouldn't be foolish enough to go to prison for him. He had to go back to his wife and children, and everything bad he had done was recorded from the beginning. It was time for him to pay the price. This made the director break out in a sweat, panicking, while Warden Ping was surprised to see Dr. Go's reaction for the first time. Meanwhile, Yu Dewee's brother also visited him, bringing good news that he had found hope to clear his brother's name because someone was willing to testify in court. Both brothers burst into tears, filled with both hope for justice and fear of being crushed by reality again. Earlier, Soldier So, who had completed his military training and been discharged, had come to see Yu Dewee's brother, agreeing to testify for him. Before, he had been intimidated by power and had not dared to testify. But because of that, he suffered from guilt and self-reproach because Lieutenant Yu Dewee had been very kind to him. His brother had found hope and went to find a lawyer. However, because the soldiers had testified falsely in the past, they would be punished if they told the truth this time, so they were afraid to do so. Soldier So alone couldn't do anything. His brother sought out Soldier So again. The young man, surprisingly, was not afraid of going to prison. He would rather be in prison than live with guilt. While he was in the army, his mother got sick, and he went out beyond the permitted time. He should have been punished with 15 days in solitary confinement, but Lieutenant Yu Dewee had spared him, valuing his filial piety and letting him borrow a phone to call his family. This kindness deeply touched Soldier So, and now it was time to repay the favor. He would find a way to contact the other soldiers and persuade them to testify in court. Back in the cell, Kang had something sad to tell. His sixth wife had actually criticized him and was having an affair with someone else. What did he have that Kang didn't? He was just a guy with fancy clothes and more money. He had worked for the FBI, was an expert in deciphering codes, was better than all that, but she still abandoned him. While Kang was upset, his cellmates gathered around, praising his new love for being better than him. But Dr. Go was called out by Warden Ping for a private conversation. Unexpectedly, Dr. Go was about to be transferred to another prison. This news struck him like a bolt from the blue. Warden Ping warned him that there was no such thing as justice in that prison, because it was full of scumbags and dangerous criminals. Dr. Go had to stop writing his accusations, preserve his life, and not get carried away with his passion. If anyone bullied him there, he could write to Warden Ping, and he would handle it. Dr. Go returned to the cell with a heavy heart, and he couldn't sleep all night. He looked up at the moon, thinking of his wife and children. In the morning, while everyone was having breakfast and Kang was lecturing Han Yang, Dr. Go quietly observed them. Then, with a heavy heart, he announced that he was being transferred to another prison. The news was met with disbelief and sorrow, and everyone's eyes welled up with tears. Dr. Go tried to swallow his food, despite the complexity of his emotions. After the meal, Kim called him out and handed him some money for travel expenses. This money was actually meant for Children's Day, to buy gifts for his daughter. But it seemed that Dr. Go needed it more now. On the day Dr. Go left with his belongings, everyone in the cell stood at the door waving goodbye. Seeing them, he couldn't bear to leave. He told Kim Ji-hyuk that he had a gift for him in the kitchen cabinet and to take it after he was gone. Dr. Go was led away, and the atmosphere was gloomy that day, with no one speaking to anyone. At the door, Warden Ping made an exception by removing the prisoner's handcuffs, allowing him to comfortably get into the car and wished him well. Back in the cell, Kim Ji-hyuk opened the kitchen cabinet and found a diary. Inside, it detailed every time he practiced and the number of times he hit the ball. Kim Ji-hyuk choked with emotion. Every time he practiced, Dr. Go was silently beside him, recording it to help him learn from his mistakes and practice better. On the last page, he wrote many words of encouragement, hoping for the day he would return to his passion with renewed strength. A piece of the puzzle was missing, but life had to go on for those who remained. Today, everyone in the cell had visitors except Kim. He was sad but didn't show it, having become accustomed to this. Unexpectedly, the warden called him out, saying someone was visiting him. Kim couldn't believe it. The visitor was Jean. He had promised his father that he would live a decent life, stop being a thief, rely on himself, and work hard to earn enough money to buy a house so that when his father was released, he could welcome him home to live with him. Jean never forgot his foster father, who had protected him during his time in prison. He even bought 100 chicken legs and 100 cartons of milk and sent them to the entire neighborhood in Kim's name, so he could be proud in front of his neighbors. Returning to Kim Ji-hyuk, thanks to the great encouragement from Dr. Go, he was even more motivated to practice diligently. His accuracy and arm strength improved day by day. He was always accompanied by his two good friends. Jun-ho even designed a speed meter for him to measure his arm strength. The machine operated on the principle of standing still, and the stronger the throw, the more layers of R it passed through, indicating a stronger arm. They didn't want to try it, but once they did, the two friends embraced in joy because the last wooden layer required an arm strength of 140, and Kim Ji-hyuk was able to break through it. This proved that the path to professional baseball had chosen him, and it wouldn't abandon him. Kim really wanted to share this with Ji-ho, but he hung up the phone as soon as he heard her voice. Now he realized how foolish he had been to break up with her, thinking that leaving her alone was good for her. Jun-ho deliberately took Kim Ji-hyuk to a private room and left his phone behind, encouraging his stupid friend to rekindle their love. But Kim Ji-hyuk wasn't brave enough to call. He returned to the cell and asked Kang how to contact someone who transferred things in prison. He wanted to write her a love letter, but before he could finish his letter, Ji-ho received flowers from another person, a classmate who was officially pursuing her. Would Ji-ho accept this new love? Perhaps she was still heartbroken after cutting off contact with Kim Ji-hyuk. Back in the prison, Kim Ji-hyuk's cell was going to welcome a new inmate, but as soon as they saw his face, the atmosphere became tense. He was the one who had stabbed Kim Ji-hyuk in the shoulder, almost ruining his entire life. As soon as Deedlemani arrived, he looked at Mr. S with murderous intent, asking where Kim Ji-hyuk was, as if he wouldn't be at peace until he got his hands on him. He brought a sharp toothbrush, razor blades, all forbidden items, and was even disrespectful to Kim. Kim, a seasoned gangster, understood that a tiger must roar to rule its territory. He immediately grabbed Deedlemani, the cocky kid, by the neck, dragged him to the water fountain, smashed the glass, and held it to his throat, warning him that if he dared to show off again, he would never see the sun. However, that night, when he bumped into Kim Ji-hyuk, Deedlemani still uttered vile words. Jun-ho desperately wanted to move him to another cell, but they were all full. His big brother had been transferred, so to get revenge for him, Deedlemani sought out Big Fat Brother, who didn't care about loyalty and only wanted to recruit more followers to increase his power, and was accepted into the group. From then on, everyone in the cell protected Kim Ji-hyuk 24/7. They kept their eyes on Deedlemani, ready to act at the slightest sign of anything unusual. At night, even when Kim Ji-hyuk just went to the toilet, his four cellmates, including the cold-hearted Udewi, got up and followed him. Even when Kim Ji-hyuk went to wash his bowl, they stood behind him, forming a barrier against Deedlemani. Even when he went to shower, the four of them wouldn't leave for a second. Mr. S, out of concern, almost fell and broke his back. However, there were still loopholes. During labor, everyone was busy, and Deedlemani realized his chance. He knew Kim Ji-hyuk would go to the trash room alone, and immediately planned to kill him. Big Fat Brother gave him a lighter, and his gang supplied flammable solvent. This time, Kim Ji-hyuk continued to go to the trash room alone. Mr. S was still suffering from back pain, so he sent the vendor to follow him. However, along the way, the vendor was detained by another prisoner who asked him to buy cigarettes with a large amount of money, and the vendor was blinded by the money and abandoned Kim Ji-hyuk. Deedlemani took advantage of the situation. He took off his shirt, poured the solvent, waited for Kim Ji-hyuk to enter the trash room, locked the door, lit his shirt, and threw it into the room full of flammable material. To ensure that no one could save Kim Ji-hyuk, he also broke the doorknob. But unexpectedly, it was the old man who guarded the trash room who was trapped inside, not Kim Ji-hyuk. Kim Ji-hyuk spotted the black smoke rising, ran over, and rescued him. He didn't hesitate to rush in and carry the old man out, despite the throbbing pain from his old wound. The old man was saved, but he was tired of life and didn't want to live anymore. Meanwhile, in the garden, Kim recounted the tragic story of the old man to everyone. He was sentenced to life imprisonment for killing 4 students. Although it seemed cruel, these 4 boys had raped the old man's daughter on a field trip, and she later committed suicide because she couldn't bear the humiliation. But they were not punished because of their family's money and power. One of them was the son of the chairman and was given a light sentence, while the other 3 were also imprisoned for less than a year. The old man, filled with rage, waited for them to be released and killed them. Hearing the story, Kim Ji-hyuk felt lucky to have escaped. His kindness in giving the old man a new shirt and going to another place to make him less embarrassed had inadvertently saved him from Didolmani's evil plot. After this incident, Kim Ji-hyuk decided not to tolerate it anymore and decided to teach Didolmani a lesson. Jun-ho followed his friend to prevent him from going too far. Encountering Didolmani in the bathroom, Kim Ji-hyuk took off his shirt, revealing his muscles, and punched him with his terrifying 140 km/h arm strength, leaving him with only a few teeth left to eat porridge with. The incident landed Kim Ji-hyuk in solitary confinement, but he was released soon after because it was Didolmani who had provoked him first. Afterward, Kim Ji-hyuk thoughtfully brought a pot of geraniums to the old man guarding the trash room as encouragement to keep living. Meanwhile, outside the prison, Yoo Dewee's brother, along with the witness and lawyer, were pursuing a lawsuit to clear Dewee's name, with a glimmer of hope for a victory. Kim Ji-hyuk also received good news from the lawyer. 10 major teams were waiting for him to sign contracts after he was released, including the Kayan team, his favorite. Things were slowly getting better for Kim Ji-hyuk, and he started to be more courageous about thinking about getting back together with Jae-ho. He called her, but this time, Jae-ho spoke first, reminding him that he was the one who pushed her away and confirming that the relationship was over, then hung up. The pain of the breakup made Kim Ji-hyuk sad, but he still had to keep living. To forget his sadness, he buried himself in his training. In the cell, Han Yang was also determined to quit drugs, although he still had occasional lapses. He longed for the day he would be released, reunite with his boyfriend, and inherit the family fortune. Even though it was always chaotic, Kim Ji-hyuk's cell was a place that helped him not to dwell in heartbreak, thanks to the humor of his cellmates. However, the tension escalated when Dong the cook started a fight because Han Yang dared to read Kim Ji-hyuk's love letter. Dong was locked in solitary confinement, and he targeted the food delivery uncle, threatening to force him to find a way for Kim Ji-hyuk to drink forbidden drugs, promising to pay him 3 million won. The uncle initially refused, but the large sum of money swayed his conscience, and he tried to slip the drugs into Kim Ji-hyuk's food. Lieutenant Yoo Dewee, with his army experience, stopped Kim Ji-hyuk from eating, suspecting that there might be forbidden drugs in the food. This incident made the cell lose faith in the uncle. Yoo Dewee deeply understood the pain of betrayal, as he was also facing the betrayal of his comrades in the lawsuit. The lawyer contacted his former comrades, but none of them dared to testify for fear of confronting the high-ranking leader's son. Meanwhile, a fire broke out outside the prison. Warden Ping immediately opened the cell doors to rescue the prisoners, even though it was a reckless and dangerous decision. Warden Na quickly closed the doors and announced a message, successfully resolving the situation. After the incident, his colleagues criticized Warden Ping, saying he acted without thinking. Lieutenant Yoo Dewee, hearing this, defended Warden Ping and recounted how he had saved dozens of prisoners' lives in a fire at the old prison, risking his own safety. The serious burns from his shoulder to his wrist were proof of his bravery. Back in the cell, as Kim Ji-hyuk was about to take his stomach medication, Han Yang snatched it away, realizing that it was different from his usual medication. With his experience in drug rehabilitation, Han Yang discovered that Kim Ji-hyuk might have been tricked by someone else. After this incident, the entire cell gradually lost trust in the uncle, realizing that not everyone was trustworthy in a place full of conspiracies like this prison. Kim Ji-hyuk was feeling down about being betrayed by someone he trusted, But the lawyer brought him some good news. He had found the perfect club for him. They would sign a contract with Kim Ji-hyuk, and they were the only ones who wouldn't use the news about his sister's harassment to attract public attention. People from the club also came to Kim Ji-hyuk's training site to film his efforts. Instead of using dirty tactics, they wanted to show the press that Kim Ji-hyuk was solely relying on his ability to rise up again. The warden also wanted to befriend the superstar, so he disregarded Warden Na's objections and allowed Kim Ji-hyuk to use a phone to contact his girlfriend. He desperately wanted to hold on to Jae-ho, who was an indispensable part of his life. But she refused to answer his calls, fearing that Kim Ji-hyuk would reject her and make her heart ache even more. He tried calling Jae-ho many times, pouring out his heart, but received no response. Feeling heartbroken and angry at being constantly targeted, Kim Ji-hyuk stormed to Deedlemani's cell. Jun-ho was afraid of a murder, so he brought a gun, but unexpectedly, Kim Ji-hyuk just wanted to reconcile with him. Deedlemani had been allowed to return to his old cell, and his cellmates were unusually silent, wary of the scary kid. Only Kim Ji-hyuk smiled optimistically. The items had been bought and delivered. He took the initiative to call Dong-bi letter 1 EBF to get the things with everyone else, because he had bought things for him with his own money, making him both embarrassed and hesitant, unable to move. Han Yang had the chance to tease him for a memorable time. Kim gently called the delinquent kid over to eat with everyone, but he was still reluctant until the entire cell shouted, and he jumped up in surprise and crawled over. Kim Ji-hyuk handed the things to Kang to share the cake with Deedlemani. This was a real family, not those gangster brothers who stabbed, slashed, and protected each other on the streets. To help Deedlemani integrate with everyone, the entire cell had to deal with the big fat brother who used to protect him. They were notorious figures in the underworld, but they didn't dare underestimate Kim Ji-hyuk's 140 km/h throw. Everyone on the other side was vicious, but they were intimidated by these brothers. The big brother could only run away, and he wouldn't dare bother Deedlemani anymore. To express his gratitude, Deedlemani became Kim Ji-hyuk's catcher for training. Unexpectedly, when he entered the field, he revealed his talent for catching balls thrown with great force with incredible accuracy. They were evenly matched, and this was Kim Ji-hyuk's opponent. Deedlemani thought he would have to serve Kim Ji-hyuk like his new boss, but he said he just needed to live normally as someone in the same cell. For the first time, someone as obedient and loyal as Deedlemani felt family affection. He happily punched Kim on the shoulder, joining in the atmosphere with Han Yang and everyone else eating the mixed noodles that Kang had made. Just as he was about to hit Han Yang according to the usual script, Kang received a reply letter from the female prisoner at the Enju prison. It turned out there was a fun game in prison where male and female inmates exchanged love letters. This time, Kang received 6 letters. He wanted to invite everyone to join in, but everyone had a lover, and Kim wasn't interested. Only Deedlemani was single and young, so he was immediately dragged in. Summer passed by, and everyone lived harmoniously in the small cell. It was true that prison wasn't scary, it was just a living environment. Happiness or sadness was up to individuals to choose and shape their own perceptions. Kang was a playboy, with so many wives, but he also had a 22-year-old son. But because of his extramarital affair, the boy cut off contact with him. Kim also confided that he had a family that used to be very happy, but then fell apart. Just as things were getting sad, Han Yang chimed in with his sarcasm. Kim Ji-hyuk continued to be allowed to train outside. This time, luck was on his side, because after all those days of texting and calling, Jae-ho took the initiative to contact him again. He ran to a corner to answer the phone, but when he came back, he put on a sad face, making Jun-ho very worried for his friend. Actually, Kim Ji-hyuk was just acting, because Jae-ho had agreed to meet and talk to him. Kang and Deedlemani's love stories were also going smoothly as they had found their ideal partners. Kang's love interest was 33 years old, and Deedlemani's was 25. However, both of these women were due to be released next week, and they all wore their hair in high ponytails and sprayed perfume. Everyone in the group felt a little uncomfortable, smelling drama in the air. Immediately, they took out the 2 letters to compare them, and they saw that the handwriting was very similar. This handwriting had to belong to a 60-year-old woman. Although it seemed a bit scary, when it came to love, people become foolish. So the two of them didn't give up and placed their faith in their pen pal girlfriends. Everyone had visitors and food brought in, except for Kim Ji-hyuk and Kim, who remained in the garden. Seeing this, Kim felt nostalgic and told everyone about his sweet past love. When he was young, she was madly in love with him and shared simple meals with him. But that was all in the past. Han Yang received a visit from his father. It was only now that he learned his mother was the one who had reported him. She wanted her son to turn over a new leaf. Yu Diwi was informed by his brother that the case had progressed because the soldier had contacted his other comrades. They agreed that they would tell the truth in the next trial. Back to the two men entangled in love, their girls wrote that they would visit and choose one. So they immediately started sprucing up their appearances, obviously knowing that the two girls were actually one, and were just playing a game of choosing. But because they had been lonely for so long, and were afraid of ending up like Han Yang, they still went for it. The one who received a letter from a visitor was Kang. He was beaming, but the woman in front of him extinguished his smile. She was his first wife, accompanied by their 19-year-old son. She came to inform him that her son had hepatitis and needed to find a matching liver, or he would die. Her blood type was not compatible, so she turned to her unfaithful husband. This news sent Kang's mood plummeting. As much of a playboy he was, he still cared most about his son. Of course, he immediately agreed to donate his liver. Fortunately, his blood type matched his son's. For the first time in his life, Kang was able to do something for his son. While going into surgery with his son, he was so embarrassed that he burst into tears. Kang's liver donation for his son brought fame to the prison. So before Kim Ji-hyuk even requested a stay of execution, the warden had approved it. Everyone prayed for his safety. Meanwhile, Han Yang was also struggling to endure each bout of malaria caused by his drug addiction, determined to quit and start over. Warden Bok came to announce that Kang's liver donation was successful, bringing relief to everyone. After donating his liver, Kang had only one wish for his ex-wife, to be able to see his son's face. He felt he had been terrible. Throughout his son's life, he had only sought pleasure outside. Now that he was halfway through his life, he finally realized how precious his family was. Family love was the most sacred love in the world. Yu Diwi's brother had been very dry before, as he was a university professor. But since his brother's accident, he had been running around taking care of him, even quitting his job and selling his house to hire a lawyer. Kim Ji-hyuk, a fool who didn't know how to express his feelings, had also started writing letters to his sister and cherished his feelings for Jai-ho. It was because of this happy prison that they had changed to some extent, realizing that they should cherish the simple things right in front of them. Kang's son learned that the person who had donated his liver was the father who had abandoned him, so he refused to see him, making Kang regretfully cry. When he was allowed to return to his cell with everyone, he was moved to the southern cell for health reasons. This news saddened everyone, so the cell lost another comrade on the same wavelength. Everyone was sad, but they had to accept it, because life was about goodbyes. But very quickly after that, Warden Peen brought good news, saving everyone's mood. It was that Mr. Kim, because of his good rehabilitation, had earned a pardon. This time, he would leave sooner or later. The prison would lose another father, but everyone was happy for him. Because as long as they met each other, treated each other well, then when they parted, there would be nothing to regret. His older brother didn't know that his best friend was dating his younger sister. So he enthusiastically asked Jun-ho who the girl was that could make him fall in love. Jun-ho was startled and didn't dare admit that he had nabbed his best friend's sister, so he remained silent. But as soon as he returned to the room to rest, he called his girlfriend and chatted happily. As long as she said she wanted to go out for breakfast, he would stay up all night with his younger brother to secure a table at a popular Italian noodle restaurant that was trending online. He didn't waste his time spamming the keyboard, and finally got a table. The two brothers were so happy that they hugged each other tightly. Back to the cell. Today was not as happy as usual. Lieutenant Yu Diwi criticized Han Yang's effeminate nature. Mr. Kang had left, and there was no one left to put his feet up for her to sleep on. Han Yang just wanted to get close to Yu Diwi, so he moved closer. but he was bluntly told that he didn't want a boy touching him. He wasn't prejudiced, but he didn't like it, making Han Yang feel hurt in his self-esteem and spirit. He was sad and couldn't be happy, so he had to go to the ball field with Kim Ji-hyuk. But it was truly the mood of a girl. As soon as Jun-ho praised him for making good progress in his drug rehabilitation, Han Yang was happy again. After comforting Han Yang, Jun-ho started to notice that Kim Ji-hyuk's throws were crooked. It was the throwing amnesia syndrome. He couldn't throw the ball in a straight line. The cause is usually psychological stress. The problem with the club or his girlfriend wasn't serious enough to cause Kim Ji-hyuk to have throwing amnesia, but his desire to play baseball well had become an invisible pressure on him. While Kim Ji-hyuk went to therapy with Jun-ho, the others in the cell went outside to sunbathe. Deedlemani showed them the gangsters in Block 6 across the way, including a few addicts. As long as they had drugs, they would stick to the cellar like leeches, and unfortunately, the biggest addict, the one who loved Mun, had once dealt with Han Yang. He spotted Han Yang and gave a wicked smile, seeming to want to pull her back into the old addiction. Back to Kim Ji-hyuk. The therapy began with hypnosis, but it seemed that the clock had been laced with sleeping pills, so he quickly fell asleep. The professor gave him a sip of Coca-Cola to wake him up, but he sprayed it all over the professor's face because it was fish sauce. This method failed, so they moved on to psychological treatment so the doctor could clearly understand his condition. Kim Ji-hyuk was asked to draw a life chart up when he was happy, down when he was sad. But for some reason, he drew all over the table, the floor, and even touched the wall. He even tried to continue, leaving Jun-ho standing next to him speechless. Jun-ho was worried that after examining him for a while, his friend might go crazy. As a last resort, Jun-ho could only show Kim Ji-hyuk the video of him at the peak of his career to regain his inspiration for playing baseball without pressure. It was true that he was really awesome back then. That was the milestone that marked his fame and his superstar turning point. But that day was also the day Jai-ho said goodbye, because he forgot her birthday, so he was very sad and wanted to cry. Finally, he was out of options and had to call Jai-ho for help. The next day, the two met at a coffee shop. Jai-ho admitted that she still loved the silly Kim Ji-hyuk very much. Someday soon, when she was mentally prepared, she would come to visit him. When she heard Jun-ho talk about Kim Ji-hyuk's pressure, Jai-ho immediately came up with a very simple solution to make an X on the middle of his palm. Because Kim Ji-hyuk was very simple-minded, as long as she told him to throw at this X, he would be able to practice throwing straight again. And sure enough, when he applied it to Kim Ji-hyuk, it worked very well. Seeing that his friend had regained his confidence, Jun-ho gave him a little more motivation by saying that if he could cure this illness, Jai-ho would probably come to see him soon. Just hearing the name of the girl he loved, Kim Ji-hyuk doubled his energy, got to work, and started practicing. In the cell, Lieutenant Yu Dewey received a letter from his lawyer and a package of snacks sent to him, making him very happy. But that happiness quickly disappeared because the letter told him that his brother had quit his job because of him. The lawyer didn't know and thought that Yu Dewey already knew about this. When his brother found out, he was very worried, afraid that his younger brother would blame himself. Seeing his brothers drooping, the group gathered around to drink alcohol and share their feelings. Yu Dewey had considered them as family, so he felt comfortable pouring out his heart. He felt that his brother was suffering because of him. If this hadn't happened to him, his brother wouldn't have lost his job, wouldn't have worked so hard, and wouldn't have been worried. Yu Dewey's second trial was approaching. His brother stayed up late drinking beer because he was worried that his brother would lose confidence and back down. His younger brother tossed and turned, unable to sleep because he was afraid that his brother was suffering because of him. As for Mr. Kim, he agreed to be interviewed to increase his chances of getting a pardon. The interview day arrived, and he was hesitant to meet the interviewer, but it wasn't as scary as he thought because she was a very cute and polite girl. Changing scenes, the head of the department had investigated the matter of the Block 6 gangsters offering prohibited items. He wanted Warden Na to deal with it quickly, but he wasn't in a hurry, saying that he wanted to wait for them to show their true colors before rounding up all those involved at once. In the interrogation room, Warden Na deliberately led Mun Kai, who had traded prohibited items with Han Yang, to confess. Meanwhile, in the cell, Han Yang was having a high fever because of withdrawal, so he was taken to the infirmary. One of their people was a runner in the prison, so he could pretend to clean up and enter the infirmary. When he confirmed that Han Yang was inside, he ran back to tell Mun, the notorious drug dealer, to add some laxative to the food delivery the next day. The ingredients in that drug were enough to make Han Yang addicted again. That way, when he falsely accused Han Yang of being an accomplice, it would be more convincing. They pretended to be suffering from food poisoning and went to the infirmary, staying there until midnight. The runner rushed in, saying that someone on the 6th floor had a torn ligament, urging the doctor and the prison guard who were guarding the floor to leave. Before leaving, he left the laxative behind. Mun thought he was asleep and seized the opportunity to open his eyes. After dealing with the prisoner on the 6th floor, the doctor and the prison guard went in different directions, joining Mr. Kim and others to eat fried chicken. Only Warden Ping, as soon as he heard about it, realized there was a problem and rushed to the infirmary. At this point, the scoundrel Mun had already subdued Han Yang and was forcing her to eat the drug. She didn't say a word, so one of them punched her straight in the stomach. Luckily, the guards arrived in time, kicked Mun aside, and saved her. Actually, it wasn't Warden Ping who saved Han Yang, but Lieutenant Yu Dewey. As a former military captain, when he saw the doctor eating chicken with him, he had a premonition that something was wrong with the infirmary, so he asked the supervisor to bring someone with him and saved Thai. After this experience, Han Yang no longer resented Yu Dewey, and Yu Dewey also confided in Thai about his brother. As soon as she heard, Han Yang realized Yu Dewey's problem and advised him to face his anxiety. He was afraid of bothering his brother, but he also really needed his help. So let his brother help him and win this retrial. Just try his best to seize this opportunity for himself. These words from Han Yang gave Yu Dewey great motivation, making him look at her in a different light. When they met again, Yu Dewey bravely asked his brother to accompany him all the way, even though it would be very difficult. As soon as he said that, his brother immediately agreed, with joy clearly visible on his face. Mr. Kim was interviewed by the cute college girl again, so he was very happy. After eating, he quickly put away his dishes after the interview, and he told Warden Ping about his joy. It turned out that having someone to chat with and confide in could be so enjoyable. The gardening area of Kim Ji-hyuk's group had another group of prisoners from a different prison coming to learn about the gardening techniques of the Western prison. Among the group was someone who had a deep grudge against Kim Ji-hyuk. The two looked at each other as if they were going to burst into flames, forecasting a future of bickering and not going smoothly. The day of Mr. Sim's pardon review arrived. Mr. Kim, Ji-hyuk, Jun-ho, and Warden Ping were all anxiously waiting outside the warden's office. But the joy they had experienced for so many days was extinguished by the words, "Not approved." Mr. Kim was among the 20 prisoners who failed to get the special pardon. Warden Ping was furious. He had been waiting for 22 years, and yet they had put him in the 20% who failed. Jun-ho treated Mr. Kim to a delicious and kind meal in the warden's office as a way of comforting him. Warden Ping went to find the warden, wanting to know why his superiors had excluded the best reformed prisoner from the list. Even the warden was confused about this. But maybe Mr. Sim would be granted a special pardon on the upcoming Christmas. Not wanting to give him false hope, the two decided to keep this information a secret. Back in the cell, Han Yang was the next person to be released from prison. There were only 3 days left on the countdown. Today, her boyfriend came to visit Han Yang, wanting her to wait at the Army Stew restaurant on the day she was released, because she didn't want her family to see her shameful appearance as a prisoner. When her boyfriend asked about her mother, Han Yang said emotionlessly that she wouldn't come because she knew her mother was a workaholic. Even when her grandmother died, her mother was still busy working at the stew restaurant. Just as things were getting serious, her boyfriend said he had a gift waiting for her on the day she was released, making her curious girl's mind perk up. The warden had to rush in and carry her out, or she would have shouted it out to the whole prison. In the visiting room next door, Mr. Kim continued to talk to the college girl interviewer. He wondered why she had chosen him to interview when there were so many other people. "Do you know me?" Bona suddenly went silent, at a loss for words. Her handbag fell, so she bent down to pick it up. The necklace she was wearing was exposed. When they returned to the conversation, Mr. Kim choked back tears and asked, "Are you my daughter?" Bona struggled to say each word, "I'm your daughter." Both father and daughter were heartbroken and burst into tears. The strong man cried loudly, remembering the past. Back then, the girl who loved him had given him a good pair of shoes, even though she wasn't rich, so he wouldn't be embarrassed. She lied and said they were fake. Then, she said she would tell him good news in the evening. He happily put on the shoes and went out to work, and she immediately took out a pair of children's shoes that looked exactly alike, so it meant that she was pregnant. Mr. Kim put on the shoes his wife gave him and went to the bar. When he met his partner, unexpectedly, he was ambushed. The incident happened so suddenly. He was arrested, and he lost contact with his wife. The ring on the necklace was the one he had put on his wife's finger many years ago, so he recognized it immediately. Bona was kind and didn't feel resentment or shame towards her father, so she became an interviewer to be able to go to prison and see him. Changing scenes, Mr. Sang had just arrived and had already become friendly with the leader of the prison. They were short of money and started plotting to find Kim Ji-hyuk's weakness to blackmail him. From the words of a fellow prisoner, Mr. Sang learned that Kim had a whole training gym in the prison. He intended to use this information to write an article about a baseball player getting special treatment in prison, which was unfair to other prisoners. Kim Ji-hyuk didn't know that trouble was coming and continued to practice diligently. Looking at the situation, his speed must have been over 140 kilometers per h. This was a good sign. Since his daughter had seen his miserable state, Mr. Kim had been walking around like a lost soul. Everyone called out to him before he snapped out of it and went to eat. Deedlemani poured him a glass of water to help him swallow. Mr. Kim simply said thank you, and he immediately offered him the shrimp. Han Yong's health had stabilized, but she still acted silly and teased everyone, because she knew that her time with them was running out. On the day Han Yong was released from prison, the whole family waited for her at the stew restaurant. This time, even her strict mother, who always put work first, was there. Before the prison gate, Han Yong was free to walk out. However, the bastard who attempted Han Yong to use drugs came to find her. He gave her a strong dose of heroin, causing her suppressed drug cravings to erupt. Her reason could not fight her addiction, and Han Yong fell back into the path of addiction. At that moment, the police arrived and arrested her immediately. One of the guys in the group waved to the drug dealer, seeming like they had planned it together. The engagement ring her boyfriend had prepared for Han Yong couldn't be given to her tonight, and her parents couldn't see their daughter. Meanwhile, in prison, Kim Ji-hyuk was practicing when he was called out by the runner, saying that the warden wanted to see him. But when he got there, he realized he was being taken to the storage room, and he had to talk to Mr. Sang in secret. He used the fact that Kim Ji-hyuk had his own training gym and received special treatment compared to others to threaten and blackmail him. He brazenly shoved his bank account number into Kim Ji-hyuk's pocket. 300 million was the amount he needed this week. Kim Ji-hyuk was so honest that he didn't know what to do. In fact, he even thought that he was actually receiving better treatment than other prisoners. Seeing Deedlemani say he had made the bed, inviting him to go to sleep, Kim Ji-hyuk thanked him and asked for his bank account number, intending to transfer him money for helping him with the ball catching. He never had the thought that he was superior to others. Udiwi's situation was looking good when the warden brought him a newspaper. Public opinion had started to shift, turning to defend him and accuse Bing Trung-o circumflex of a crime. While Kim Ji-hyuk was in the midst of his complex emotions, his girlfriend finally came to visit him. The two looked at each other and burst into laughter because of their silly love. Just one phrase, "I miss you," made Jae-ho laugh. Their relationship was healed as it had been before. She put on their matching rings again, proving that he had always been in her heart. At the same time, Bona continued to visit her father. Since their first interview, the two had gotten along very well. Now that they knew they were family, they got along even better. Mom said that Dad was a good man, so I came here to see for myself. Talking to Dad, I realized Mom was right. These words comforted Mr. Kim a lot, making him wish that he would be pardoned soon so he could reunite with his wife and children. He went to church to thank God for giving him such a lovely daughter. He asked God to give him a chance to start over. Warden Ping couldn't hold it in anymore and had to tell Mr. Kim the good news: he would be on the Christmas pardon list. So, just be happy and wait for the day you can reunite with your family. At the same time, everyone in the cell received this news and cheered for Mr. Sim. Kim Ji-hyuk refused to give Sang money, making him angry and sending him to find the boss. The boss told him to take pictures of Kim Ji-hyuk training in his private training gym and post them online to expose him. He had already found a journalist who writes sensational stories. Prisoners don't have phones, but the runner had a phone. They pushed open the training gym door excitedly to take pictures, only to discover that the place was already anti-slip. It was all thanks to Kim Ji-hyuk's intelligent girlfriend. When Kim Ji-hyuk was pouring out his heart to his girlfriend, she said something that made him wake up. "Do you want to play baseball or win the championship? If you are passionate about it, even without a training gym, you can still fulfill your passion." Kim Ji-hyuk understood. He went to ask the warden to dismantle the training gym. Let him be like all the other prisoners. Warden No wasn't as talkative as the other wardens and got right to work. Just as that was over, another wave of trouble came. Kim Ji-hyuk's friend Byabja was taken to solitary confinement because Sang accused him of selling drugs in the prison. Clearly, he was targeting someone close to Kim Ji-hyuk to get revenge for not giving him money. In the middle of the night, Jae-ho received a message from her boyfriend. He asked her, "If I give up baseball and become unemployed, will you support me?" Jae-ho was worried, afraid that her boyfriend would do something rash, but she still comforted him. "I will always be by your side, no matter what kind of person you become." Outside, Soldier Sao delivered a threatening letter to Yu Dewee's brother, seeing if anyone was intimidating him. If he testified in court, they would take his life. Sao said the other comrades had also received similar letters and were scared and had backed down. The lawyer didn't think Warden O'Circumflex would play this trick because he was rich and was busy making false evidence. Seeing Yu Dewey down about this, Mr. Kim started a conversation with the brothers, saying he had faked some certificates of his own, from engineer, gardener, architect, interior designer, and even a TOEIC score of 700 points. He had them all. Yu Dewey was impressed. "You are a true talent, it's just that the time hasn't come yet." Kim Ji-hyuk was very good at seizing opportunities. He agreed, "If Mr. Kim gets out of prison and has any business ideas, I will be your loyal investor." Hearing this, he was immediately motivated. Mr. Sim then brought up the ideas he had been brewing for a long time, but looking back at the 20 years he had been in prison, those ideas were all very outdated. But it was from this conversation that he realized Didomani was very intelligent. So that night, he told him about his great, outdated ideas, making the other brothers in the cell unable to sleep. The next morning, the warden came and whispered to Yu Dewey that there would be a cell inspection tonight. Everyone was relaxed because they were living honestly, but after going through so much, Kim Ji-hyuk couldn't help but be vigilant. Sure enough, he found a package of drugs hidden in Mr. Sang's bag. Kim Ji-hyuk immediately realized that Mr. Sang wanted to harm Mr. Sim so that he would lose his chance for a pardon. And perhaps he was the one who sent the threatening letter to Yu Dewey's witness, all because he wanted to put pressure on Kim Ji-hyuk. He kept apologizing. "We were going to deal with him ourselves, but everyone advised him to be patient, because everyone was about to be released." Didomani realized that Mr. Sang didn't have the guts to do this, and it was definitely the boss pulling the strings. They had targeted the last person in the cell, Didomani. He tried to hide himself, only falling as if he saw the mark of a hit on his wrist. Mr. Kim knew for sure that the boss had done it. Didomani told them that they didn't want him to continue catching for Kim Ji-hyuk's practice. It was only because Kim Ji-hyuk said that he couldn't hit people that he endured being stepped on by Mr. Sang and the boss. This couldn't go on. In the middle of the night, Kim Ji-hyuk quietly went to see Mr. Sang. Seeing that he was willing to listen to him, he didn't hold back and said that he would take the 300 million for himself and then report the boss for violence. How could he possibly obey the boss? If that was all there was to it, it would be over. But this guy was gay. He wanted Kim Ji-hyuk's body, so he pressured him, saying that he had to go to the burning area alone tomorrow at 12 o'clock midnight to meet him. This was the final limit for a man. The next day, Mr. Sang received the 300 million he had requested. At 12 o'clock midnight, Kim Ji-hyuk appeared at the burning area. He looked at him with perverted eyes, not noticing the heavy weight on his hand. When he realized it was a weight, he wasn't even afraid and brought up Kim Ji-hyuk's sister to drive him crazy. He knew that he was about to be released, that his future was bright, so he wouldn't be stupid enough to kill anyone. But Kim Ji-hyuk still held the weight tightly, stepping closer, making him truly afraid. Then, before he could swing the weight at this scoundrel's head, a branch of wood struck him first. It was the old man who burned the trash. He took some of his anger out on the bad guy. Afraid that he would hit him, Kim Ji-hyuk had to run over to stop him. The old man thanked him for saving his life. He did this to remind him not to ruin his own future because of this lowly person. Mr. Sang was seriously injured and taken to the infirmary, but he still tried to accuse Kim Ji-hyuk of beating him. When Warden Ping said that the old man from the firewood room had confessed to beating him, and that Mr. Sang's recording of the blackmail for 300 million had been recorded by Kim Ji-hyuk, he was so angry that he almost vomited on the spot. Not only that, he had also recorded him intending to betray the boss. If the boss found out, his life would be in danger. Kim Ji-hyuk asked the warden to play the recording for the boss. He wasn't evil, this was just the karma Mr. Sang had to face. Baeobji, who had been locked in solitary confinement, was released. Before he left, Kim Ji-hyuk sent him a letter of encouragement. "Live a good life, because after I get out of prison, I will hire you as my secretary." Christmas arrived, and it was also the day Mr. Kim was released. Another parting, but this time, everyone was happy for him. Kim Ji-hyuk hugged the man tightly, like a father, and promised to contact him after he was released. Mr. Kim praised Kim Ji-hyuk as the best player he had ever known, encouraging Lieutenant Yu Dewey to fight for justice for himself. He patted Deedlemani on the head and left this cell full of love. When he went outside, Mr. Kim didn't forget to hug Warden Ping, expressing his gratitude for his help. He promised to live a good life and not forget to contact him. After all these days of being imprisoned for a crime he didn't commit, Yu Dewey was finally able to shed tears of happiness when he received news that his brother and lawyer had successfully appealed for him. Back to Jun-ho, he hated the violence in the prison. Hearing the supervisor say that Warden Ping had beaten a prisoner, he couldn't take it anymore and went to find him to scold him. But when he learned that the prisoner had dared to flirt with him and said that he would harm Warden Ping's wife and children after he was released, Jun-ho was furious and went to his hospital bed and punched him relentlessly. After this incident, Warden Ping, who had always been strict, relaxed for Jun-ho. Changing scenes, the day Kim Ji-hyuk was to be released was approaching. As a superstar, the director of the Correctional Services Department personally visited him, leaving the other wardens on the sidelines. Kim Ji-hyuk was allowed to shoot a promotional video with the director of Correctional Services. When the whole world abandoned you, the prison was the first place to reach out to you. It was all because the warden forced him to say it, and he stood on the side, enthusiastically giving him a thumbs up. After the interview ended, Kim Ji-hyuk was allowed to eat at the same table as the warden and Warden Na. The other wardens were sitting at the other table, asking Na's best friend about his past. What made him such a heartless, icy person? They then learned that Warden Na had hated the cold, heartless world since elementary school. During class, the teacher forgot to check their homework, and everyone thought they were off the hook. But Na raised his hand resolutely to remind the teacher to check their homework, making the whole class want to punch him in the mouth. His best friend couldn't hold back and bit Na's hand to make him shut up. During martial arts class, Na forced his best friend to touch his knee for it to count as one, making him angry and leading to a second round of fighting. Before being released on bail, Kim Ji-hyuk filmed another video thanking all the prison guards who had helped him during his time in prison. But the one who had helped him the most was Jun-ho. He forgot to thank him again, making his friend want to cry. Seeing Kim put on a sincere apology, Jun-ho took advantage of the opportunity to admit that he was dating his sister. Hearing this, Kim Ji-hyuk couldn't hold back and grabbed the fire extinguisher, wanting to deal with him right away. There were only 6 hours left before Kim Ji-hyuk was released from prison. No one in the cell could sleep. The room now had only 3 people lying there, confiding in each other all night. Before parting ways, Kim Ji-hyuk hugged Yoo Dee-wee and Deedlemani. Deedlemani was very grateful to him, because he was the first person to treat him like a human being. Kim Ji-hyuk had to leave, and the day he left was exactly like the day he arrived. Prisoners from the cell waved goodbye, shouting very loudly. Outside, reporters surrounded him. As soon as they saw him, they started taking pictures non-stop. After hugging his elderly mother and brother Jun-ho, Kim Ji-hyuk searched the crowd for his girlfriend and walked towards her, making their relationship public. From now on, he wouldn't miss her anymore. Kim Ji-hyuk once again looked at his own glory. He stood in the middle of the baseball field, feeling the love of his fans. Although he didn't have the same glorious victory as before, his heart no longer weighed heavily on the matter, because at home, he always had a priceless grand prize waiting for him, Jai-ho. As long as he had her, that was enough. In prison, Yoo Dee-wee had read the news that his appeal had been successful. He was cleared of the charges, and the guilty party was punished as deserved. It was true that life had many twists and turns. However, it was just external, objective events. The thing that made people strive or be disheartened was only our willpower. So, no matter what circumstances you are in,